Hello, everyone. It is right at 11, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's session. Welcome to the Quick Learn series. Today, we'll be covering some advanced tips and tricks with Word and primarily talking about creating templates and modifying templates and using some more of the advanced functionality in that way. My name is Tennille Fincham, and I'm a technology instructor with KUIT. With me today, I have Susie Johannes, also a technology instructor with KUIT. Kind of during this session today, Susie is going to be helping to facilitate questions. We'll stop often, so if you do have any questions, as we're going or when we're pausing for questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. If you want to, you can unmute your microphone as well. So if you have any questions, either as we're going, post those during the chat, or, as we pause for questions, post during the chat or unmute your audio. Also, just a quick note, I said this a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to say this again. We are recording today's session, so after the session, I will send out a follow-up email that has a link to the recording. It'll be on our website for you to view later, or for anyone who was unable to make the session today to view. So I'll send out the recording link after today's session is over. Just a few meeting tips if you're new to using Skype for Business. The first one here is to maximize your window. This is going to give you the best viewing results and let you see the most of my screen that you can, so you can kind of see, what I'm doing and all the features of Word. The second one is to mute your microphone to cut down on feedback, and this is just when, I'm presenting options here. If you want, you can unmute it to ask questions when we pause. And then the third one is to go ahead and click the chat message icon, and this will open up the chat on the side of the screen and allow you to kind of see the chat that's going on and to ask any questions through the chat there as well. Just an overview of what we'll be talking about today. Again, I mentioned that we would be talking quite a bit about templates and just using some of the features in a way to create our own templates. So we're going to start out with taking a look at the existing templates that Microsoft Word has and then modifying those to possibly fit our needs. And then we'll be creating our own template, and I'll show you how you can start to use columns and some of the advanced features there, also tables, images, shapes, smart art, and then we'll also be talking about paragraph and character styles. So before I get started, are there any questions about what today's session is going to cover? Is everyone able to hear me okay? Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to start out with then talking about existing templates in Word. So let me just pull that up here. So all I've done here is I've created a new document, and we're going to talk about some of the existing templates in Word. And to find those, once you have a document open, you could just go to File, and then here we're going to click on New. There's a lot of templates here, and I find it's easiest to search for some keywords. So let's say we're searching for something like a work order. We need to create something to send out to individuals to kind of show the work that was done for them. So I'm going to just search work order here and press enter. And this is going to pull up a number of templates that match that keyword set. So there's a lot of different templates here. You can see just really briefly, they're kind of all different colors, and we have some different, shading and things like that. I'm just going to select one because once you do that, you're able to see a larger preview of this, so you can kind of see if this is going to meet your needs for what you need. In this case, let's say that this template does actually meet our needs for the most part. So here, in order to start using this template, I can just click Create. This is going to create a new Word file for you. And now if we wanted to make this usable for our particular department, there's a few things we can do. If we're happy with the overall look of what the color scheme is here, the layout of everything here, we can simply just start to click into each one of these fields and add in the relevant information for our specific department. So, here under company name, I may click and type in technology instruction. or something to that effect. You can also delete these fields if you don't need them. So like a company slogan, probably not going to be anything that I need here. And I could just go ahead and delete that out from underneath. Next, you can go ahead and finish filling in the rest of your company information, and then save this as a Word document and be able to, send this out from there. If you wanted to change, the kind of look and feel of the overall template, there are several options here, and this is where I want to introduce something called themes in Word. So let's go to the Design tab here. By default, the theme that Word uses is something called the Office theme. So the theme determines a number of things. One, it determines kind of the color scheme that's going to start out with your document. So let's just click another one here. Let's click this facet to kind of see. So right away you can see that this is going to change the color scheme, pretty substantially. The other thing that themes control are the different paragraph and character styles. So things like the style of character for titles, for headings. And as you cycle through each one of these, you can kind of see the different changes that it makes depending on the character style that's being used. So it's a really quick way to kind of change the entire look and feel of your document without having to get, too deep into a lot of changes that way. And it looks like you lost my screen, so let me try this again. Can you all see my screen again? Is the audio a little bit better now? Okay. Okay. So, we talked about the different character styles that we can apply here that determine what the headings will look like and what our title will look like for our character styles and paragraph styles. The other thing that comes with a theme, and that is part of the theme, are these different color sets. So by default, again, a lot of the times it's this office theme. You could change this to something that you liked more, possibly this, I don't know, this blue scheme. And then this, as you see, kind of changes the colors of each of the paragraph styles to match the color scheme that you've chosen. Finally, the theme also determines, and what you can change in the theme are the font stylings for your titles and headings and things of that nature. So here, by default, again, we come with Office, and it's Calibri Light and Calibri for the body and for titling. If I wanted to change it to something else, maybe this Garamond, then I could do that, and it changes not only the font on my page now, but also updates the character styles to be displayed to show with the current font selection that I've made. Are there any questions over kind of taking an existing template and modifying it so that it meets sort of your department's needs using, either themes or changing the character styles or things like that? What about, has anyone done this before, taken a current template from Word and kind of modified it to fit your department? Oh, cool. They're flyers. Yeah, that's a great idea, Denise. Okay, great. So there's Denise mentioned flyers. There's a whole slew of other things here. If you're looking for like newsletters, you could also look for like cards. So if you do like birthday cards or retirement cards or something like that for your department, or holiday cards, things like that, you can search for cards there. And then, as I mentioned, there's also like newsletters. So just a couple more examples of how you can get a layout kind of started for you and then just input your information, and that can be quite quick. Okay, so that's starting out with existing templates. What I'm going to show you now is just a way that you can start to create your own template. So let me show you what the final kind of output of this is going to look like. This is an example of a newsletter. And so you'll kind of see where we begin, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about adding in these columns that allow you to have a smaller column on the right than on the left, and then adding multiple columns for other areas, using tables to call attention to specific portions of your newsletter or flyer. And then this down here, this is something called Smart Art. So I'll show you how to add this in if you need to show like a process or a hierarchy of sorts. And then kind of the behind the scenes here that you don't see, we're going to make a lot of changes and kind of talk about changes made for like the titles and for the headings of all of our stuff for this particular newsletter. So let me show you what we're going to begin with. So this is the text we're going to begin with. This is all of, maybe the paragraphs that we got from individuals to add in about their specific portions for the newsletter. And we've just compiled these on one Word document. And that's what we're going to use here to kind of beef up and make this look more like a newsletter and not just like a plain set of words running down a page. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to apply some paragraph styles so that we can call attention to these headings. And again, these styles that are up at the top here, this is determined by the theme that I'm using, and it's also determined by, the font that I've chosen and the color source. So I believe I'm just in the Office theme, which is the default, and I haven't changed anything of the style sets or the theme yet. Okay, so to change these headings, all we need to do is, either click before or after the paragraph and then just select the heading that we want to use. So this KU Campus Technology News, I'm going to click after news and then select the title because that ends up being the title of our newsletter. Next, we have sort of this subtitle here, this Faculty Staff Summer 2016, and I'm going to use, I have a subtitle here that could be okay. I'm going to actually end up using this heading 2 because I like the contrast that this gives, so I'm going to use heading 2 here. And then I'm going to go ahead and make those changes then for, all of these here that end up being my heading. And I'm going to put these as heading 2 as well. And then just kind of bump this guy over. So I'm just going to go down the page here. And wherever I notice that there seems to be, a heading that covers some information, I'm just going to move these and make these into a heading 2. By default, it's using these paragraph styles, so anything that is its own paragraph will be a part of that style. So to create a new paragraph, we just do a hard return, and that creates a new sort of space for a paragraph to begin. So that's how it determines what text to make into that style. So here we're going to let's do heading 3 on these. Okay, so we have our headings done here. I want to show you a couple of keyboard shortcuts just when you're working with InWord. So let's start. I'm just going to take out this paragraph return. So we all know, enter creates a new sort of hard return, a new paragraph beginning. There's a keyboard shortcut. It's a shift return, and that creates not a completely new paragraph, but just a soft return to the information. So this is sometimes helpful when you have like a subtitle under information and you want it to be a little bit closer and not necessarily in its own paragraph. So that is a shift return creates just a soft return, and it's actually still a part of that paragraph as far as the paragraph styles is returned. Okay, so I'm going to just do enter again here to get that back to its hard return for a paragraph. Now the next one will add in a page break, and that is control plus enter. So control plus enter adds a complete page break wherever you have your cursor entered. And will put that information on a new page. So a couple of keyboard shortcuts there that I use quite a bit here. All right, next up, we're going to create some columns for this first page. So if you remember, what we had for this column was a column that was larger on the left than it was on the right. And this is just a particular column style that I've used. So to create a column just on a specific portion of your document, all you want to do is just click and highlight the portion that you want to create into multiple columns. And then we're going to come up to page layout. And here under columns, we could select one here, but I really kind of want to choose more columns here so I can show you these other options. So the one that we actually want, is this right, because that will give us a smaller right column than left. And then down here, I do just want to point out that this is going to apply to the selected text. So that's important here because we don't want this to be on the whole document. We just want it to be on the portion that we selected. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So that creates my column for me just on this first page, but then notice, the rest of this is not in a column format. We're going to create another column here for the next three paragraphs. And let me make this a heading. So we're going to create this as a 3-column spread. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut of Control-Enter to add this as a page break so it goes on the next page. And then again, in order to create those multiple columns, I'm just going to highlight the text that I want, come up to page layout. Here, I'm just going to select 3 columns from the drop-down since we've already seen where you can look at the more options. So I'm going to choose 3. So what happens with these particular columns is it ends up a little bit wonky. And let's say, I want the title to be the very first thing at the top here. What you can actually do is specify column breaks so that information will break, where you've selected it as opposed to continuing on. So I'm going to click Before Step Up Your Game here. I'm going to come up, I'm on page layout still, breaks, and then column. And then same thing here for the MyKU. I'm going to click Before MyKU, choose Breaks, and choose Column. And that gives me the exactly laid out columns that I'd like, and it's not overflowing text. I don't have to worry about deleting information or changing, the size of my columns to get the information in the correct place. Okay, so I'm going to pause just for a minute. Are there any questions over, starting to create columns in your pages or starting to use the existing, paragraph styles? Yeah, column breaks are really great. It's sort of one of those hidden things with the breaks. So once you find out about them, it's a little bit life-changing for your columns. Yeah, we can change the color of the headings. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the session because we'll be talking about 1, creating your own styles, and 2, modifying the style. So yes, you can change the color of the headings. Looks like we maybe have one more question, but cool, great. All right, so we've created these multiple columns. The next thing I want to talk about is tables. And if you remember what we had in our completed document, we have this portion of our newsletter that is in, multiple columns here, but it also has a color behind that. And this, I achieved just creating as a table. So I'm going to show you how to create, something like this for your information. Okay, so we happen to already have the text on our page. So what we need to do is create a table from our text. And you can do that by highlighting the existing text that you have within your document. And then we're going to come up to Insert. I'm going to choose Table, the drop down here. Now you're probably used to all being able to select the number of rows and columns, but since I have this text highlighted, one option that I have here is Convert Text to Table. So I'm going to select Convert Text to Table, and what I get is a dialog box that asks me, how many columns do you want to add? It's going to go ahead and automatically do the number of rows for you depending on the number of lines that you have of text. And it's going to separate that text at the paragraph mark. So that's how it determines, number of rows and things like that. You can also have it separated at tabs if you're using something like that, or a comma, or you can create, your own specific symbol to denote when information should be broken up. Okay, so I'm going to leave this at just one column and 8 rows and click OK. So what I get here is a table of this information. Also, just to point out, if you get a table at any point in time, you can click on the table completely and choose Convert to Text. So Layout and Convert to Text. So I can say at the paragraph mark and click OK. And then that brings me back to just my text of information and not formatted as a table. So that can be helpful as well. Okay, so I'm going to do this again, sorry. So Convert to Table, okay. So now I have my table. I need to format this a little bit differently because remember I needed to have 3 columns for this and with the information there. So the first thing I need to do is add in some columns. The easiest way to do that is by hovering your mouse at the end here, and you should get this plus sign icon, and this allows you to add in, just multiple columns here. So now I have my 3. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this information. So I'm just using the Control C to copy and Control V to paste. And maybe I do Control X to cut that out. And then, again, I'm just going to paste this in the correct places here. Okay, so this is looking closer. I'm just going to highlight the rows that I'm not using down here, right click, and choose Delete Cells. I get a dialog box here, and what I want to make sure I do for this particular example is to delete the entire row, and then click OK. And then I'm going to add in a return down here. Okay, so this is getting closer to looking like we want. The first thing that I, would probably do is this information I'd like to be merged into one cell. So I want this title of the helpful information from KUIT to be kind of merged across the entire band of this table. So if you've done this in Excel, kind of the same thing here. We're going to come up to Layout under our table tools. And here I can choose, so I got to highlight all the cells first. So highlight all the cells, and then I can choose Merge Cells. So Layout, Merge Cells, and it gives me just one complete, kind of title row across the top here. There's a lot of other options here within table. Here you can see if we needed to add any new rows, we can do that by inserting above or below. Sometimes it's nice to be able to also merge cells, down. So if I didn't want a separate cell for the title, I could merge these into one cell as well. So that's an option. And then, there's also ways where you can split the table and lots of options there. Also, to talk a little bit more about tables here, these are the alignment of your text within a cell. So right now, everything is at a top left alignment. If I wanted information maybe to be more centered, I could choose, centered completely at the top. I could align both horizontally and vertically and center the information within the cell. And then there's also the ability to align stuff at the bottom of the cell and then either left, right, or center. So lots of options to align your actual text within these cells of the table. You can also specify things like cell margins. So if you wanted a smaller margin at the end here where the text is, we could bump this down, to 6, and that gives us a little bit more room, a little less padding within the cell here. And then there's also, text direction if we needed to change how the text was viewed within the cell. Okay, for this particular table, we're going to make this pretty easy here on us, and I'm just going to select the table as a whole. Again, to select it as a whole, you kind of hover up in the upper left-hand corner, and you get a 4-point arrow cursor, and then you click on that, selects your entire table. And then I'm going to click on the Design tab here, and for my borders, I'm going to choose border, no border, because I want it to look kind of seamless, like there's just a color behind this. So I'm going to choose no border. And then to get the color behind, I have the entire table selected, so I can choose shading here and just select, a color to have it shaded in the background. Now, if you're using tables for the traditional table use, there are, a ton of styles here that you can start out with. This allows you to make your headings maybe stand out a little bit more, or even the information maybe that you have displayed along the left-hand side of your table, have that stand out a little bit more. Since we're using this just to kind of put a color behind our text, I'm not going to use any of those styles. Also, just to point out, while you're looking at your document here, this still gives you and shows you where these borders would be. So I still have sort of a dotted line of where the border would be. If I come up to File and Print, however, I can see right away that my border is not going to be printed and not going to be shown. It's just kind of like guidelines for you so that you know exactly where those borders are. Now, the next thing that I probably want to do is change these columns so that it was in line with the width of the one above it, especially because we're looking at a 3-column layout for each one of these. So to do that, I'm just going to hover my mouse on one of the column border lines here, and you get an arrow pointing to the left and to the right, and this allows you to just kind of pull and drag and adjust the column width. So I'm just going to do that here for both of these. And I'm just kind of aligning it. I don't know if you can see this here. I'm just kind of aligning it with the text that's above it. So there's sort of that guideline that shows me where that text, is above that. Okay, so that is using a table to kind of highlight information on this newsletter and give us sort of an area to put key facts and information. Are there any questions over, starting to use tables in this way, or using tables at all? Has anyone ever used the text to table or the convert table to text before? Yeah, it's pretty helpful. It's like another one of those like hidden features that's there. Very cool. All right. On the Mac version, do you know if you're using 2011 or 2016? 2011. I will have to look in and send that in the follow-up email because right off the top of my head, I'm not sure um, where it is on the Mac version, but I'll write that down and add it as a follow-up point. Cool. Um, I guess one thing that I forgot to point out here, I'm going to scroll to the top of this document. Um, when you start to add in these styles, so we're using like headings and things like that, you'll start to notice these little carrots next to each one. This can be kind of nice because when you click this, it will actually collapse down to that heading. So see, I'm just kind of collapsing this information down to that heading. So this can be kind of helpful when you're looking at a lot of information and maybe you just want to collapse something that you don't need to read or that you've already read and just gives you some more screen resolution there. So that can be really helpful. You can also see, where these different areas are and kind of jump to them by choosing View and then selecting this navigation pane. And then this is going to show you each of the areas where you have a heading applied, this heading 2 applied. See, we're on headings here. And when I click them, it will actually jump me to that place in the document. So that can also be really helpful for those documents that are really long that maybe you have to read or review or even create. Also, just as a side note, with using headings in this way in the built-in headings, it makes it really, really quick and really, really easy to add in a table of contents because it pulls the information and basically builds the table of contents from the headings that you use. So to use the built-in styles and either modify them or create your own will make it a lot easier to create one kind of areas or, for you to jump around to different places within a document and to create a table of contents tool at the end if needed. Okay, so I'm going to close this here. I just wanted to show you a bit more with using those styles. Okay, so this is going to lead me into talking about adding some images to our newsletter here. The first one that I'm going to add in is just a logo here at the top. So I'm just going to click my mouse, where I want that image to be inserted. I'm going to come up to Insert and choose Pictures. And I'm just going to browse my computer for those images. Okay, and then I have this TI logo, and that's the one I'm going to insert. So I'm just going to select and choose Insert. So the first thing that I probably want to do here is resize this image, which I can do, and this is the easiest to do from the corner handles here. And it's always a good idea to hold down the Shift key when you're working with images like this and then click and drag in, because that will constrain the proportions so that you don't get an image that looks a little bit off, especially when you're dealing, like with the circle, so it doesn't look like, this at the end or something. Let's just change the size here a little bit more. Now what we see is by default, it puts this wrapping for this image in line with the text. So it kind of makes it a part of this text line. But what I'd really like for this to do is to kind of wrap and be with both my title of KU Campus Technology News and with my subtitle of Faculty Staff Summer 2016. So in that case, I need to change the wrapping style from in line with text to with text wrapping. And here I'm just going to select this first one, which is a square. It's going to put kind of a bounding box of a square around your image and have the text flow around it in that way. So I'm going to choose square. And right away we can see that changes. I'm going to do a couple returns here just to get this down. And right away, now this is sort of our text wrapped around our image and it's no longer on the same line as our text. Something else here, just to point out with images, I'm going to I'm going to click on the wrap tool again here. And I want to show you one thing. Here we have move with text selected. There's also this option for the fixed position on page. So the difference between these, here, if I were to hit return a few times, see how my image is moving with that? So it's sort of tied together with that text string. That's the anchor for it. That is moving with the text. Now the other option here for wrapping is to use a fixed position on the page. So I'm going to select that. And now if we hit return on our text, our image still stays in the same place. So depending on what your needs are for the images, you can have a lot of adjustments just with changing the wrapping and changing whether it's in a fixed position or whether it moves sort of with your text at the bottom there. Also, it looks like, I need to do a little bit of an adjustment here because my column has run on into the second one. So again, I'm just going to use that column break. I'm going to click before the column start that I want, and page layout, breaks, and then column to move that up at the top there. All right, we're going to add in another image here. I'm going to add it on this second page, and I'm going to put it, let's see with this, talking about this quick learn series here. So again, I'm just going to insert my cursor wherever I want my image to be, choose insert, select pictures, and maybe I'll use this training options icon and choose insert. Again, I probably want to resize this by holding down shift and then dragging from the corner. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And then I need to change my wrap tools again because remember this is in line with the text and that's not, exactly what I want. So a lot of options here. I'm just going to browse through some of these. We saw what the square does. The tight does sort of the same thing but gives less of a buffer between the text and the image. So, here I can move it wherever I want, and the text kind of forms around it. The other options here are to do through the text. So let's choose that and see what this looks like. So here, the text is breaking up again. It kind of runs through the text there. Our other options are things like top and bottom, which kind of gives a break between the text both at the top and the bottom of the image. So gives sort of a whole line and a whole area for the image. So that can be useful sometimes. And then we have things like behind the text. So this sits behind our text. And then in front of text, we'll move this to be the foreground object as opposed to the background object. In our case, though, we're going to use the tight text wrapping. And then I'm just going to move this, down a little bit to where it looks, kind of okay here. Are there any questions on kind of changing the text wrapping? Looks like maybe. Cool. All right. So I'm going to move on to shapes here. I'm going to keep this pretty simple, but I just want to show you how you can move these and kind of wrap or position the shape on the page. So I'm going to choose insert, and here I'm just going to select shapes. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line kind of at the bottom of the page just to give a visual of this being a page break. So I just selected the line tool. I'm going to hold down shift because that will give me a perfectly straight line across the bottom here. And then I'm going to use the format area to maybe change the color. You can also change the weight of what that looks like, And since I'm using a line and here I can change this to, maybe like dashes or something. Now the same thing goes here. For this particular one, I may want to change the wrapping. This is probably fine. It can go wherever because I don't have any text here. But what I may want to do is fix the position on the page so that as, text rolls down, it's not dependent on where the text is on the page, but instead it's just at a fixed position on the page. So that's really quickly just, adding that in and just noting that you can also change, the wrapping here or make this a fixed position on the page. Okay. Let's talk really quickly about smart art, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about the character styles and how we start to change those to our needs. So smart art, as I mentioned before, is a really great tool to use to show like the process of something or to show hierarchy and just give kind of a visual representation of that. So I'm just going to create a smart art process to show what people need to do to get help from KUIT. So I'm just going to click on Insert tab again, and right next to Shapes is Smart Art. Lots of different options here. We have things that are like a visual representation of a list. We can also do like the hierarchy, as I mentioned. So if you need to create any of those hierarchical or organizational charts, you can do that here. There's also things like to show the cycle of something. For our case, I'm going to choose this process one, and then I'm just going to choose, there's lots of options here for showing the process, but I'm just going to choose this basic chevron process and then click OK. So this is going to insert it on the page. Like an image, I can move this around. So let me click and drag this where I want it. And maybe I'll hit delete and add it down here at the bottom because that's where we're going to go. So process. Okay. So our process is, need help. And we'll say phone. And then our next one is maybe like email. And then if I wanted to add something to this, I can come up to design and add a shape after. So I can keep adding to this process here. And here I may say like visit us. Whatever that may be. Now, there's this huge bounding box around this smart art, but I can change this, to be quite a bit smaller. And then when you do that, this should come up onto my next page. And that just denotes the space that will be around this specific smart art. And here, just like everything else, I can change the design of what this looks like. So I could make it look more 3D. I could change the colors here. And then select, one of these other options to kind of change how that looks visually. So that's smart art. It can be really helpful, as I mentioned, hierarchy, process, lists, anything like that you need like a visual representation of what something looks like. Smart art is really great at that. Okay, so moving on to the last little portion of our quick learn today, I'm going to be talking about modifying and creating these paragraph styles. So here's a really great thing about styles as well. They're really easy to modify to your needs. So let's say we get this perfected, we send this off, and everyone comes back and says, this is really great, but we'd really like to see the headings in red. All we need to do here is we're going to right click on our heading 2 from the styles menu, and we're going to say modify. And then here, I'm just going to change the font color from blue, maybe to this orange or red. We'll say red here. And click OK. And then anything that was listed as a heading 2 is automatically updated to that new color range. And we don't have to go back through and do each one individually. Another way we could have done that is, I could have highlighted one and changed it to red, come up to heading 2 and said update heading 2 to match selection, and then that does the same thing. So you can change the heading either on the heading itself or by right-clicking and modifying that selection. Looks like the question is, how can it be printed as a page size 1117? Great question. There are options here under page layout, and here you can select the size of your printed page. So 11 by 17 here. You can also change the margins. Sometimes it can be nice to change the margins from narrow or from normal to narrow. That just gives you a little bit more room to work with. But normal can also be nice to add in the extra white space there. Okay, so that is changing an existing style to a new color. Lots of options here. I'm just going to click and modify this again. Lots of options here. You can make things bold. You could underline it. This also determines like the paragraph spacing for text. So here under format, I could choose paragraph. And if I needed to, I could change the spacing before and after. So here you notice this has a bumped up a little bit more spacing before the heading. You can change the line spacing. Lots of different options here that you can change to really specify your specific styles that you need for your newsletter or whatever you're building here. I'm just going to click cancel on both of these just to kind of keep this as is. Now, the one text that we haven't really formatted here on our newsletter is the text that kind of talks about these departments. So I'm going to show you how to create a style from scratch as opposed to modifying an existing one. So really the first thing that we need to do is we need to get the text looking like we want. So I'm just going to highlight one bit of text here, this customer service center. I'm going to make it bold and I'm just going to underline it. So bold and underline for this text. Now what I can do is I can click on more here and choose create a style. And it's going to say paragraph style preview. So this is creating a style based on what I've already formatted. Here I'd probably want to give this a unique name like departments. And if I choose modify, I could go in and change some of the paragraph settings for this. One thing else that you can do here is you can click on font and maybe I wanted to make this, all caps. I could do that here and click OK a couple of times. And now I have this as part of my style set that then I can go in and apply to these additional settings here. Now, if I needed to update one, remember I can just come in, highlight it. Maybe this font's too big. I can move this down, right click and choose update departments to match selection. And now all of those headings, that I created for the department is fixed. We could do the same thing here for adding bulleted items. So maybe I would select this and do, the bullets. Something to point out here is you can change where this is tabbed over at. So I can click and drag, maybe these over to change the position of this. And again, I would click in the drop down, choose create a style, and maybe this is just list, and click OK. And now I can use that, on all of these other ones here. So really quickly, I've formatted all of that. And the really nice thing comes if I need to update anything, that makes that really easy. So what we've been talking about is paragraph styles. There are some times where you need to create just specific character styles. So when you apply a paragraph style, it's going to apply to the entire paragraph. But for example, we have this, email address down here at the bottom, and maybe we want this to be in a different style than the rest of the text in this paragraph. And in that case, we would just want to create a character style. So again, I'm just going to format this to look like I want. Maybe I'll underline it and I will make this blue just so that it denotes, that this is a URL or this is a mail link or something like that. Then what I can do, again, I'm going to click in the drop down. I'm going to choose Create a Style. I'm going to name this Link. And then I want to be sure on this one to choose Modify. And the important thing here is here it says style type, linked, paragraph, and character. Here I want to just make sure I choose character so that this style isn't applied to the entire paragraph. So I'm going to choose character and click OK. And now, if I had another URL in here somewhere, I could apply just that specific character style, to just individual characters and not the entire paragraph. Once you're happy with what this looks like and you're happy, with the styles that you've created, you can save this out as a template. And then you can share that template with others to be able to use, the character styles that you've created for this. So to save something as a template, you'll come to File, Save As. I'm just going to choose Browse here. And by default, it's saving as a Word document, but here in the drop down, I'd want to choose the Word template. So Word template. And then by default, this is going to save in, your personal Office templates. But if you wanted to share this with other individuals of your team, you just want to make sure that you'd go to like a shared drive and then you can save that there. So, maybe I just save this back, into this quick learn folder here. And then you have a template that others can start to use with the character styles and things like that already in it. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I guess just one more really quick thing here. Actually, let's pause for questions. Are there any questions over anything that we've gone over today? Okay, so first question is, can I demonstrate how to create a table of contents? Yes, let me show you what that looks like. Here, I'm going to create, let me make sure this is, let me just change this so it doesn't mess us up here. I'm going to create just a new page, so I'm just going to do a control return to add in a new page break. So this is where my table of contents is going to go. So you just want to make sure your cursor is inserted wherever you want your table contents to be. And then we're just going to come up to the References tab here. And we're going to choose Table of Contents. Sorry, my mouse keeps clicking back and forth. I'm going to choose Table of Contents. Since I've already used those heading styles, see how in each one of these here, it might be a little hard to see, but when you start to look at your computer, you'll see things where it has like heading 1 and then a series of dots, heading 2, heading 3, and that's how it determines the information to pull in. So that's where it's helpful to use those headings that are there. So I'm just going to choose one of the automatic tables here. And right away it puts in the name, and this is all those heading 2s, remember, and it puts in the page number for each of these. Now, if anything were to change, if I were to, maybe change the title of this, and maybe this gets bumped, I don't know, to the next page or something, right? So we've made some changes. You just want to make sure we come up to our table of contents, and here we're going to choose Update Table. And then I usually just go ahead and do update entire table because sometimes I can't remember all the changes that I may have made. So I'll do update entire table and click OK. And now we have, the change made to the title. And notice now we have things on page 4 because I did that extra page break. So this will update automatically for you for your table of contents. And you can have this on a new page or you can put it on an existing page. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be on a new page. I could have just put it at the top, of this existing page or however I wanted that to be laid out. Any other questions over anything we've gone over today? Um, I do just want to point out, our next quick learns that are coming up. We have another one coming up on Tuesday, July 12th. That's going to be covering creating interactive PDFs with Adobe InDesign and Acrobat. And then we have another one for our summer series that will be covering some tips and tricks in Excel 2013. So those two are coming up in July. And then, I'll send a instructor follow-up. I'll send a link to the recording. I think there's a couple of outstanding questions here that I need to answer about the Mac. And I'll send some additional learning resources in that follow-up email as well. And with that, thank you all for your time today and have a great afternoon.